Steven Spielberg has spent more than 50 years building one of the most successful careers in film history. His movies have earned billions at the box office, won multiple Academy Awards, and fundamentally changed the way Hollywood thinks about blockbuster entertainment. From Jaws and Raiders of the Lost Ark to E.T., Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, Spielberg's filmography is packed with movies that shaped entire generations of moviegoers. But what many people don't realize is that Spielberg also has an invisible filmography. Hidden behind the movies he actually made is a long list of projects that never reached the screen. Some were announced publicly, some had scripts completed, some had actors attached and production schedules in place. Yet for one reason or another, they simply vanished. And that's what makes these stories so fascinating. Because sometimes the movies that don't get made can tell us just as much about Hollywood as the ones that do. Today we're looking at three of Spielberg's most intriguing unrealized projects. A superhero film that was decades ahead of its time, a musical biopic about one of America's greatest composers, and a historical drama that Spielberg spent nearly 10 years trying to make before it collapsed at the final hurdle. Hello and welcome to Box Office Bhaskar. This channel exists to pull back the curtain on the global film industry. I examine film through three lenses: the business behind it, the content within it, and the audience behavior that drives all of it. If you want to understand film at a deeper level, you're in the right place. If someone told you that Steven Spielberg nearly directed a comic book movie in the early 1980s, your first reaction would probably be disbelief. After all, this was long before the era of Marvel, the DC Universe, and billion-dollar superhero franchises. At that time, comic book adaptations were still considered risky propositions, with only a handful achieving mainstream success. Yet, Spielberg's interest in adapting Blackhawk dates back to exactly that period. The character first appeared in 1941 during the height of World War II. Blackhawk was an ace pilot who assembled an international squadron of elite flyers to battle the Axis powers. The stories combined wartime, adventure, pulp action, and comic book heroics in a way that was hugely popular during the 1940s. By the late 20th century, however, the character had largely faded from public consciousness. That changed when reports emerged that Steven Spielberg had become interested in the property. The rumors gained additional attention when comic book writer Mark Evanier later recalled hearing that actor Dan Aykroyd was being discussed for the lead role. Whether that casting was ever considered seriously remains unclear. But the speculation was enough to generate excitement within the comic book industry. In fact, DC Comics became so optimistic about the possibility of a film adaptation that it relaunched the Blackhawk comic series in 1982, hoping to capitalize on Steven Spielberg's interest. For a brief moment, it seemed possible that Spielberg would deliver a major superhero movie decades before the genre became Hollywood's dominant force. But timing proved to be the project's greatest enemy. During the same period, Spielberg was directing and producing some of the most important films of his career. Raiders of the Lost Ark had become a massive success. E.T. the Extraterrestrial was about to become one of the highest-grossing films ever made. His schedule was overflowing with projects that demanded his full attention. As a result, Blackhawk quietly disappeared. What is more remarkable is that the story did not end there. More than 30 years later, in 2018, Warner Brothers announced that Spielberg was once again attached to direct a Blackhawk movie. That wasn't merely a nostalgic revival. David Koepp, one of Spielberg's most trusted collaborators and the screenwriter behind Jurassic Park, War of the Worlds, and his latest movie Disclosure Day, was hired to rewrite the script. Industry observers suddenly found themselves wondering whether one of Spielberg's oldest unrealized projects was finally about to become reality. Instead, history repeated itself. The DC film universe entered another period of restructuring, studio priorities shifted, and the project slowly faded from view. No official cancellation was ever announced. It simply stopped moving forward. Today, Blackhawk remains one of the greatest unanswered questions of Spielberg's career. A project that almost happened in the 1980s, almost happened again in the 2010s, and still technically isn't dead. The second project on our list couldn't be more different. In the late 2000s, Spielberg became attached to a biographical film about George Gershwin, one of the most influential composers in American history. Gershwin's music helped define the sound of 20th century America. Compositions such as Rhapsody in Blue, An American in Paris, and Porgy and Bess remain cultural landmarks more than 80 years after his death. His story seemed perfectly suited to a Spielberg film. Gershwin was the son of Russian immigrants who grew up in Brooklyn and rose to extraordinary prominence before dying tragically young at the age of 38. It was a story filled with ambition, creativity, success, and heartbreak. In 2009, DreamWorks acquired a screenplay written by Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Doug Wright. Reports suggested that Will Smith, Robert Downey Jr., and Tom Hanks had all been considered for the lead role at various stages of development. Later, Zachary Quinto emerged as the actor most closely associated with the project. With Spielberg reportedly planning to direct, the film appeared to be gathering significant momentum. Yet, despite all the enthusiasm surrounding it, the production encountered a surprisingly fundamental problem. Nobody could agree on who should play Gershwin. Casting debates continued, scripts were revised, development stretched on, momentum gradually slowed. What had initially looked like a prestigious awards contender became trapped in the endless cycle of Hollywood development. The final blow came when Spielberg shifted his focus to other projects, most notably War Horse. Once his attention moved elsewhere, the Gershwin film lost its strongest advocate. The irony is that many movies survive weak scripts or uncertain financing. This one had neither problem. It had studio support, an acclaimed screenplay, major producers, and some of Hollywood's biggest stars expressing interest. Yet, the inability to settle on a lead performer proved fatal. The result is one of the most intriguing what-if stories in Spielberg's career. Somewhere in a studio archive sits a screenplay about one of America's greatest composers that almost brought together Spielberg and a major Hollywood star. Instead, it became another entry in the long list of movies that never happened. Of all Spielberg's unrealized projects, none appears to have meant more to him than the Kidnapping of Edgardo Mortara. Unlike Blackhawk or the Gershwin biopic, this wasn't simply another development project. It was a story Spielberg pursued for nearly a decade. It had become one of his major creative priorities. The film was based on a shocking true incident from 19th century Italy. In 1858, 6-year-old Edgardo Mortara was taken from his Jewish families by authorities of the Papal States. The justification rested on a secret baptism allegedly performed years earlier by a servant who feared the child might die. Because church law regarded the baptism as valid, authorities concluded that Edgardo must be raised as a Catholic. The removal of the boy sparked international outrage. Political leaders, journalists, and religious figures across Europe and America became involved in the controversy. The case eventually became symbolic of broader debates surrounding religious authority, civil rights, and the future of modern Italian state. Spielberg first became interested in adapting the story around 2008. By 2014, the project had been publicly announced and development accelerated rapidly. Screenwriter Tony Kushner adapted historian David Kurtzer's acclaimed book into a screenplay. Mark Rylance was cast as Pope Pius IX, while Oscar Isaac entered negotiations for a major role. The production appeared destined to become Spielberg's next major historical drama. By early 2017, the project had entered pre-production. Financing was in place, key cast members had been assembled, the screenplay was complete. Everything appeared ready. Then the production encountered an obstacle that sounds almost unbelievable. Spielberg couldn't find the right child actor. The role of Edgardo Mortara was the emotional center of the entire story. The audience needed to believe in the boy's innocence, vulnerability, and humanity from the very first scene. Spielberg and his team reportedly conducted extensive research involving thousands of children, yet none of them felt right for the role. As the search continued, another opportunity emerged. Spielberg received the screenplay for what would become The Post, starring Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep. The project had a tight production schedule and immediate awards season potential. Spielberg decided to move forward with it instead. The Mortara project was postponed and then it simply never restarted. What makes the story particularly remarkable is how close it became to reality. This wasn't a case of financing falling apart or a studio losing interest. Everything was ready, the script existed, the cast existed, the director was committed, the missing piece was a single child actor. Eventually, Italian filmmaker Marco Bellocchio developed his own adaptation of the story, released Kidnapped or Rapito years later. Spielberg's version, however, remains one of the most significant unrealized films of his career. Looking at these three projects together reveals something surprising about even the most successful filmmakers. We tend to imagine directors like Spielberg operating with complete creative freedom, able to make whatever they want whenever they want. The reality is far messier. A superhero film can disappear because another blockbuster demands attention. A biopic can collapse because nobody can agree on casting. And the decade-long passion project can be halted because the right child actor never appears. Hollywood history is filled with films that never happened. But Spielberg's unrealized projects are particularly fascinating because they came very close to reality. In some cases, they were only months away from production. In others, they survived decades of development before slipping away once again. And that leaves us with an intriguing thought. If even Steven Spielberg has a hidden filmography full of unfinished dreams, abandoned projects, and unrealized ambitions, how many other great movies are sitting in studio drawers right now, waiting for a chance that may never come? I hope you liked this video. Please subscribe to my channel for more in-depth conversations about the global film industry. And let me know in the comments, which of these three projects would you like to see made into a movie? I will be back with another video very soon. Until then, it's bye from Box Office Bhaskar.